Imagine looking a dying girl in the eyes, watching her be murdered, and then turning your back and just never speaking of it for
Is
years.
an incredibly heavy thought.
Right. I mean, what kind of psychological cage makes a father do that? What invisible architecture of fear convinces an entire community to just watch an innocent man get sentenced to life in prison?
While the real killer preaches to them every single Sunday.
Exactly. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are taking you into a really tense, fascinating excerpt from Chapter 5 of a narrative titled Robbers of Life.
And our focus today is really on the anatomy of institutional power.
Yeah, so we're looking at the sociology of the bystander, the heavy burden of collective silence, and, the severe psychological toll of whistleblowing.
The author provides just a masterclass
Mm,
in how manipulation operates on a systemic level here.
yeah.
Like, this isn't just about one bad actor. It is an exploration of how an entire ecosystem becomes complicit in its own subjugation.
And the immense friction required to break that cycle. So the story drops us into what the narrator, Sarah, calls the second Sunday, and it establishes the baseline of control right away.
It really does.
The antagonist, a deeply corrupt pastor, is actually physically absent from the church, but instead he sends a junior pastor to deliver this, highly specific sermon.
Warning the congregation against speaking ill of, quote, men of God.
Right, threatening that anyone who speaks stupid words against him will receive a curse.
So the mechanism of control here is entirely psychological. He is utilizing preemptive deterrence.
Mm-hmm.
By leveraging their deeply held faith, he constructs a mental barrier because physical force requires constant presence and energy.
Right, you'd have to physically be there to enforce it.
Exactly. But if a leader can successfully equate questioning their authority with divine punishment, the followers will just police themselves.
They internalize the warden.
Yeah, they really do.
You see that dynamic in high control groups all the time. The text notes that in this one, he had won. I mean, he creates a framework where critical thinking is framed as an existential threat to the believer's soul.
But that psychological cage really gets tested when the narrative moves out of the sanctuary.
Yeah, it moves into a very private domestic space. We go to a Sunday lunch at the home of Sarah's friends, Stella.
Right.
They are sitting around eating smashed matok, which is a traditional East African dish of savory mashed green plantains, and it's served with meat stew.
And grounding this high-stakes intervention in the normalcy of a family dining room creates this really stark contrast.
It totally forces the institutional trauma into the domestic sphere.
It does. And you see the immediate physiological response to that collision in Stella. Like, the conscious mind decides to hold an intervention, but her autonomic nervous system is reacting as if a predator is in the room.
Yeah, the physical description is just intense. I mean, she is
Mhm.
shaking. Her blouse is visibly moving with the rapid beats of her heart. And she is sweating so profusely, she has to constantly wipe her chest with a white handkerchief.
See, that is a pure sympathetic nervous system response right there.
Really?
Yeah. Her amygdala is flooding her body with adrenaline and cortisol. For a victim of abuse, simply preparing to name the abuser out loud to authority figures.
In this case, her parents.
Right. It triggers the exact same biological panic as the abuse itself. The body literally does not know the difference between the memory of the threat and the active presence of it.
Which is why having Auntie Sue there, a professional counselor, is so critical in this room.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, if you've ever tried to deliver shocking news to a family, you know it rarely goes smoothly. Auntie Sue takes control of the room, but she does it in a really specific way.
She doesn't start by dropping the trauma on the table.
No, she starts by flattering the parents. She tells them they should be proud because the girls have demonstrated immense maturity in handling problems.
It is a brilliantly calculated de-escalation tactic.
How so?
Well, when parents are presented with the reality that their child has been harmed under their watch,
Hmm.
especially when rumors have been circulating, the primary reflex is often defensive denial.
Right.
The ego tries to protect itself from the guilt of failing to protect the child. So Auntie Sue provides a structural anchor.
By front-loading the conversation with praise.
Exactly. She praises the girl's maturity, and that neutralizes the parent's instinct to react with anger or disbelief. She basically builds a runway of validation before landing the devastating truth that Stella is a victim of the pastor.
And the truth lands hard. But then the narrative reveals a detail here that completely shifts the gravity of the whole situation.
This part is staggering.
Stella's father, who is a church elder, already knew.
Yeah.
He knew about the pastor's embarrassments. He even knew about murders. He literally admits he had a fear of manipulation and had just remained entirely silent.
It's hard to hear.
It is. I have to be honest, looking at this from the outside, I struggled to feel sympathy for the father in this moment.
I think a lot of people would feel that way.
I mean, he is an elder. He's tasked with protecting the flock. Isn't this just outright cowardice?
Well, it is easy to label it cowardice from a safe distance,
Well, enough.
But sociologically, in deeply corrupted ecosystems, silence functions as a survival mechanism.
A survival mechanism.
Yeah. When a leader possesses the absolute power to destroy your reputation, your livelihood, your family's social standing.
The perceived cost of speaking out feels insurmountable.
Exactly. The father is experiencing extreme cognitive dissonance. He knows the truth, but his environment requires him to act as if the lie is real just to survive.
And that survival instinct cascades right down to his wife, Stella's mother. Her reaction is just heartbreaking.
It really is.
She feels cheated. She says she had been going to the devil to ease the pain in her heart, and she describes it as putting off fire with petrol.
That phrase is so powerful.
It is. She even asks what sin she committed to make God so bitter toward her.
That phrase, putting out fire with petrol, it perfectly illustrates the closed loop of spiritual abuse.
Because the institution causing the psychological injury?
Is the exact same institution she relies on for psychological healing.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And notice the misattribution of blame there, too. She assumes her daughter's abuse is a divine punishment for her own unknown sins.
So she shields the pastor from accountability by internalizing the guilt herself.
Right. That is the ultimate victory for an abusive system. The victims begin to basically generate their own justifications for the abuser's behavior.
Sarah, the narrator, captures the mechanics of this complicity with a really sharp metaphor, actually.
The tick metaphor.
Yes, she observes that the world is full of people who are not ready to remove a tick. They would rather let the tick keep sucking their blood and grow fat than actually fight it.
And if you think about it, a tick is a parasite. It cannot survive without a host,
Right.
but the host tolerates the parasite because the chronic, slow drain of blood feels more manageable than the acute, immediate pain of extracting it.
It's like if we think about how a community tolerates a massive injustice, it kind of reminds me of a distributed load in architecture.
Oh, that's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, like if you have a massive weight on a bridge, you distribute that burden across hundreds of suspension cables. No single cable holds the full crushing weight.
So if an entire congregation stays silent about a corrupt leader,
The moral guilt of that silence is distributed across hundreds of people.
Yeah.
No single person feels responsible enough to risk their own standing to stop it.
and that distributed guilt is what allows the most extreme transgressions to occur right in plain sight.
Which takes us to the darkest secret held by this church.
This is where it gets really chilling.
A girl named Tabitha is murdered. Her body is found inside the church with bruises on her neck. A gardener, who's a completely innocent man, actually witnesses the pastor commit the murder.
He sees the whole thing.
But through legal maneuvering and a highly convincing lawyer, the narrative is totally flipped. The gardener is found guilty and sentenced to life in prison.
And the pastor, the actual murderer, serves as the star witness against him.
It's just like a dark magic trick. But the subversion of reality here, I mean, it relies heavily on the community's willingness to accept a scapegoat.
Entirely.
But how does that happen mechanically? Like, it is one thing to stay quiet about financial corruption or rumors, right?
Yeah.
But the congregation literally watches an innocent man get handcuffed while the corpse of a girl lies in their church. You might think, I would never stay quiet in that scenario.
Most people assume they wouldn't.
So how does groupthink override basic human morality on that scale?
It really comes back to the preservation of the community's worldview, confronting the reality that their spiritual leader is a murderer.
It would shatter everything.
It would require dismantling their entire reality, their faith, their community structure, their personal judgments.
The psychological friction of that realization is just intolerable.
Exactly. So the community collectively constructs a shared illusion. The innocent gardener basically becomes the necessary cost to maintain their cognitive equilibrium.
Wow.
By accepting him as the scapegoat, they just don't have to face the terrifying void of tearing down their own institution.
They sacrifice a stranger to protect the fiction of their own safety?
That's exactly it.
But the cracks in that fiction start to show during this intervention at Stella's house. Because while Tabitha's story is being discussed, Sarah notices her own father is sitting there in a foul mood.
He's visibly disturbed.
Yeah, he is. and Sarah pushes him. She says it's sad the gardener remains in jail for a sin he didn't commit, and she just wonders out loud if the case could ever be reversed.
And that slight pressure is all it takes for the dam to break.
Yeah.
Because the father has been carrying an undeclared moral injury for years.
He confesses right then and there. He takes the room into a flashback. It was a Wednesday afternoon. He was walking past the church and thought about greeting the pastor. The door to the vestry, the room where clergy prepare for the service, it was wide open. He looks inside. He sees the innocent gardener tied to a chair facing the wall, and he sees the pastor on the ground, pinning Tabitha down, choking her.
It's a horrific scene.
It is. And then Tabitha, who is facing the door, makes direct eye contact with Sarah's father.
Oh,
She tries to cry out to him for help, and he just turns and runs away.
It is the specific trauma of omission.
What do you mean by that?
Well, he didn't just witness a crime. He actively abandoned a dying girl when she recognized him as a potential savior.
Yeah, she looked right at him.
That specific image, the eye contact, it becomes a localized trauma that replays in his mind continuously.
I can't even imagine.
He watched the gardener get framed. He watched the community move on. And he sat in those pews while the killer preached, all while holding on to that exact visual.
And he tells the room he had promised himself never to tell anyone. But as he finally speaks the truth, Sarah sees her father cry for the very first time.
The relief is immediate for him.
It is. He agrees to visit the gardener in prison, to apologize, and to actually testify so the case can be reopened.
Because by confessing, he is finally dismantling his own internal prison.
Right.
He traded his integrity for safety years ago, but as Sarah observes, he essentially locked himself in his own jail.
And this moment sparks a huge philosophical realization for Sarah. Her father asks her if she wants to be a lawyer when she grows up.
And she says no, right?
Yeah, she says she wants to be a judge to ensure thorough investigations. But ultimately, she believes being a writer is more powerful. She says a writer writes what is more justice and can change any situation by just words.
See, the pastor maintained his authoritarian grip because he held a monopoly on the narrative.
He dictated who was cursed, who was guilty, who was innocent.
Exactly. And Sarah realizes that the ultimate countermeasure to corrupt power isn't necessarily within the confines of a courtroom, which, as we've already seen, can be easily manipulated. True justice begins by reclaiming the narrative and documenting the truth.
But documenting the truth takes a severe toll on the person holding the pen. I mean, if you consume a lot of media, whistleblowers are usually portrayed as triumphant heroes.
Oh, for sure. The music swells, the bad guy goes down.
Exactly. There is this immense feeling of vindication. But the text provides a painfully realistic look at the biological and psychological cost of fighting an institution.
It's not glamorous at all.
Not at all. By the end of this chapter, Sarah does not feel victorious. She says she feels nosy and actually describes herself as a fake heroine.
Yeah.
She is just profoundly exhausted by listening to people's dark secrets.
She is experiencing secondary trauma and severe hypervigilance.
Hypervigilance.
Yes, her nervous system is basically stuck in an elevated state of threat detection.
Which warps her entire perception of reality.
Completely.
She is haunted by a paranoia that someone is trying to kill her. Her anxiety completely fractures her sense of time.
She notes that she misses the night during the day.
Yeah, and she misses lunch during breakfast. Her brain refuses to stay in the present moment because the present moment feels inherently dangerous.
And the human brain is just not designed to sustain that level of chronic stress.
It's too much.
It is. Her desire to escape into the future, like missing lunch at breakfast, is a psychological flight response. The pursuit of justice requires enduring a prolonged state of biological exhaustion.
But despite that exhaustion, Sarah anchors herself with a closing metaphor that explains the undeniable necessity of pushing through this pain.
The metaphor of the sugar thief.
Yes. She describes a scenario where a child steals sugar from the kitchen. The mother discovers the theft, interrogates the kids, and mistakenly beats the innocent siblings while the actual thief goes scot-free.
And so the thief experiences a false sense of invincibility.
Right.
They evade consequence and just continue extracting resources.
But the biology of the theft catches up. The sugar eventually rots the thief's tooth. Decay sets in. The pain becomes unbearable. And finally, a dentist has to pull the rotting tooth out. The guilty thief feels the agonizing pain of the extraction, while the innocent siblings can finally smile with all their teeth intact.
It's a vivid image.
It is. Sarah concludes from this that no evil will go unpunished.
And that metaphor outlines a universal law of extractive power systems.
How do you mean?
Well, whether it is a corrupt spiritual leader, a toxic corporate culture, or even a political dictatorship, systems that rely on consuming their own foundation will inevitably experience decay.
The rot is a structural certainty,
Exactly.
but the extraction is brutal. Pulling a rotten tooth requires causing acute trauma to the mouth. There is blood, there is pain, and it affects the surrounding tissue.
It's never a clean process.
No. Sarah also uses the imagery of clearing a thorny bush. You cannot just plant beautiful, fruitful trees in a briar patch.
Right.
You have to spray chemicals or set the brush on fire to destroy the thorns first. The destruction of the toxic element has to precede the growth.
And the intervention at Stella's house is really the lighting of that fire.
Yeah.
They are preparing the extraction by engaging a female lawyer and bringing in Pastor Moriyama.
Right, a leader with actual integrity mentioned in the text.
Exactly. They are gathering the surgical tools needed to pull the pastor out of the community's jaw.
Wow, yeah.
The process will be agonizing for the congregation who protected him, but the infection just cannot heal while the rot remains.
We have covered immense ground today. We traced the invisible architecture of preemptive control, where fear is just weaponized from a pulpit.
We really did.
We looked at how a distributed load of silence allows an entire community to sacrifice an innocent man just to protect their fragile worldview. We witnessed the crushing moral injury of a bystander and the severe, disorienting hypervigilance that comes with deciding to blow the whistle.
And it becomes incredibly clear that institutional power relies almost entirely on our willingness to internalize the blame and distribute the guilt.
Yeah, the text proves that carrying a lie is ultimately heavier than the acute pain of confronting the truth.
That's beautifully put.
As we close out this deep dive, there is a final question to consider for you listening. Think about the rotting tooth. When a community finally does the grueling, agonizing work of removing a deeply rooted, corrupt leader, a massive void is left behind.
A huge one.
What fills that vacuum? Does the revelation of such horrific secrets permanently shatter a community's ability to ever trust authority again? Or is the shared trauma of the fire, the collective pain of the extraction, the exact foundation required to build a culture that is finally, genuinely unbreakable? Thank you for joining us today. Keep questioning the structures